Hi everyone, and welcome to Shukin Science. In this video, we'll continue going through some examples of monohybrid crosses using the framework that I've laid out in our previous videos, this time focusing on another non-Mendelian mode of inheritance, which is multiple alleles. So we're going to use the example of blood type in humans. In this case, it's giving us a little bit of background information just to remind us of how blood typing works. If you need a bit more explanation on this, check out some of my previous videos. So it does remind us though that blood type is determined by 3 different alleles. So there are 3 versions of a gene that you could inherit, which come together in pairs of 2 to determine your blood type. And it is telling us here the order of dominance. Now, what's interesting about blood type, as you see here, is that there's actually 2 dominant alleles. The fact that the type A and type B alleles have this equal sign between them, it means that they're codominant. So not only does this demonstrate a multiple allele type question, it also shows us an example of codominance. Sorry. And then, of course, there is a third allele here, this little I, which is demonstrating the most recessive allele. So in the case of human blood types, there are 2 codominant alleles, and they are both equally dominant over this recessive allele, which it goes on to explain results in type O blood. Okay, so we have our mode of inheritance. Now we're going to try and determine the genotypes of the parents. So it tells us that the phenotype of the man in this case is type O blood. And we should recall from the background information provided that the only way to inherit type O blood is if you have 2 of these recessive alleles. Since it's the most recessive allele out of the 3, the only way to be type O is to have 2 of those little I's. And then it says that he has a child with a woman with type B blood. Now, this is not enough information in itself for us to determine her genotype, because to be type B, you could be homozygous for this IB allele, or you can be heterozygous. You could have one of those dominant IB alleles, and then you could also have a recessive allele. Some people might be tempted to say you could also be heterozygous for the IAIB. However, because these demonstrate codominance, this heterozygous individual would demonstrate a different phenotype. And if you recall the previous video on blood typing, this would actually result in an AB blood type. So this could not be correct. We know that the woman only has 2 potential genotypes. Anyways, it says that they actually have a child, and we know the blood type of the child is type O. So in this case, we're actually wanting to know what the genotype of the woman is. We want to know, is she homozygous for that IB allele, or is she a heterozygote? So this is a slightly different approach to problem solving. Sometimes they actually ask us to determine the genotypes of a parent depending on the genotype of an offspring. So we could still use some Punnett squares to figure this out, or we could just kind of logic our way through it. If, for example, this was the cross, if she was in fact homozygous, being crossed with her type O partner, then the cross would look like this. So we mimic that process of meiosis by splitting up our alleles. And then lastly, we'll mimic the process of fertilization by bringing our alleles together. And as you probably guessed, there will be no type O children produced from this cross. So there's no way for this woman to be homozygous for that B allele, because then it would be impossible for her to have produced a type O child. And you could probably have figured that out without even doing the Punnett square, because in order for them to make a type O child, this child must inherit one of these recessive alleles from the dad, which is great because dad has 2 to offer. But the other allele needs to come from mom. And if she's homozygous, she doesn't have a recessive allele to offer. So, I mean, we don't even really need a Punnett square to solve this. But let's do the second option just for some practice. If the mom is in fact heterozygous, and now this is the cross that occurred, we're still going to split those up. And now look what we see. We still have some type B individuals, so that would be these 2 here. However, we end up with a 50% probability of producing fully recessive offspring, which would have type O blood, which must be this child that they produced. So to answer the question, the genotype of the woman must be heterozygous. She must have one dominant allele for type B blood and then a recessive allele. That's the only way that this could produce a type O child. All right, I'll do a few more practice questions in the next video before we move on to dihybrid crosses. So go ahead and check those out if you feel like you need a little bit more practice. Thanks, everyone.